magnetic motor. Build yours today. Paul Babcock, latest Leak project, September 2016. All right, folks, we have a real treat for you today here at the Leak Project. We have Paul Babcock with us. Now, he's got some great websites that I would definitely recommend checking out. The first one is magneticenergysecrets.com, and he's also got a personal website that's available at paulmariobabcock.com. And it's just an honor to speak with you. We had a chance to speak a little bit before the show. How the heck are you?
Oh, thanks. I'm doing great, and thanks for all the interest. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you, too. And if you would, please, for our audience, give them a brief background about yourself, and then let's get into your work and what you specialize in.
Well, I'm born a geek, die a geek kind of guy. Grew up on a little reservation town here in eastern Washington, and just had a fascination with magnets, electronics, all things psychic, and, you know, all esoteric interests from a young age. And my hobby turned into a career, and of course, I've been a Nikola Tesla fan since I was a kid, and just started on a life mission early in age to figure this stuff out, what they were really talking about. Was it real? How did it relate to the laws of physics? And, you know, that's been intertwined with my working career as an industrial dog out there in avionics and radio communications, and, you know, traveled to have Pro Bull traveled has been my career. So I've been all over the world doing electronics for, God, at least 35 years now. So, and we started Flyback Energy, our company, as a platform to take all this technology my two partners and I have developed over the last 20 years to the marketplace, and that's where we are now.
Well, that's fantastic, and I'd certainly like to get into your work and your technologies that you've helped put together. What exactly is, if somebody was to pick up one of your books, such as the one I'm looking, or even a DVD, I'm looking at one you have right now, Babcock DC Motor Exclusive Full Disclosure. You know, I mean, are you putting together basically energy machines with magnets?
Correct. You know, being a big fan of the laws of physics, and my research into all this, trying to understand Tesla, zero point, all of it, I really came to the conclusion through just hardcore empirical observation with magnets that magnets have an exploitable energy value, that science will tell you that magnetism is action at a distance, that you can use them as levers and you can use them to transform energy, but they have no energy value unto themselves. So I take issue with that because the empirical evidence says that's totally incorrect. So there's been lots of people before me who have done all kinds of different research and machines and have proved it and verified it. And so I'm not the first guy to say it, and I won't be the last. I just spent my time defining it mathematically, how it related to the laws of physics, and how to exploit it and make it exploitable so it can actually be used in power society. You know, if you don't have something that can't be commercialized, it doesn't really serve any purposes. And that was the big problem, is so many people created prototypes and stuff, but they'd run about 15 minutes before they blew up, or they were, you know, the size of a pickup truck and, you know, hugely expensive and a lot of work and mass for not much horsepower out. Although it proved the principles that magnetism has an energy value, I was the guy that was determined to turn it into something that could be commercialized for everybody.
Have you actually made something then that creates energy with magnets good enough to commercialize?
Absolutely. That's what that motor, you know, that motor disclosure is about. That's our first prototype. And I'm not the only guy doing this stuff. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think our approach is probably the best. You know, it took a while. We had the theory pretty well perfected back in the early 90s. You know, my two partners and I mean, we've seen electrical phenomena and all kinds of mysterious stuff. We're all power engineers, things that you just can't explain with standard physics. And then it seemed all mysterious at the time, but we figured it out, and we figured out that it's this energy value that's within magnetics that shows itself occasionally. Mother Nature has it governed, and that's what Lenz's law and resistance is about. So we figured out how to trick Mother Nature's governor, and everything we do is within the known laws of physics. There's no esoteric anything, and it's very hard to prove us wrong. That's why we have been able to get where we've gotten. And our first prototype, that motor, it shows the over unity effect. I'm not a real fan of that term. We define it as mathematical inequality, to where learned our way around the Maxwell, which we call we call it force without induction, or the elimination of Lenz's reactions. And so once we were able to do that, and the other half is we're able to create very powerful magnetic fields for very little, electromagnetic fields for very little energy. So between the electromagnetic fields that we create for practically no cost and the permanent magnet, and the permanent magnets that we drive with that don't induce any Lenz's reactions, we completely altered the physics. We took Maxwell right out of it, and now we have beat Mother Nature's governor, and now we can produce motors that literally we're turning the magnetic kinetic force within magnetic flux out of permanent magnets into mechanical action, and it has no relationship to the input energy. So we're able to show that no matter what we do with our machine right now, we have 1,300 watts of electrical input that transforms to 1,300 watts of pure heat that's accountable. The mechanical action comes strictly from the magnets. It has nothing to do with the input. It's catalyzed by electricity, but not a product of the electricity. So in our machine, even though we have 1,300 watts in, we have an accountable 1,777 watts of energy. So, and that's the inequality. And once you understand how to do this, you always have more accountable energy than your input energy.
That's awesome.
And it's, I used to get beat to death by physicists, it was always combat, and now it's not so much. It's changed a lot. I mean, the public awareness and perception of what's possible has really transformed in the last 10 years.
I got to say, too, because I've never been really good with spending a lot of time in putting something together. Like, for example, I talked to somebody yesterday that actually has patents on third-gen night vision. I kind of call him Uncle Eddie because he's not really my uncle, but with the way that we met, it's kind of like I feel like I've known him forever. He's about 90 years young now. And make a long story short, he put together these tubes that would take an entire day to put together one of them, and it was basically every element in the chart, and I couldn't do that. I would run out of steam, essentially. I'd have to do 30 different things in that amount of time just because I have an attention span of a goldfish. So the fact that you can do something like this, I find quite incredible. And how much does something like this does it cost to put this together, what you're referring to, this prototype?
We built our prototype with, we called it our masking tape and bubblegum approach. We started building it in 2001. My two partners and I, we made a pact in 1991. I started in on it heavily in 1988. I was really inspired by Joseph Newman. I'd been studying everything and anybody in the field for years, since probably I was in college in the late 70s. And read everything Tesla, and it was just trying to find a crack in the wall of the physical formulas, and then through a serendipitous event, I wound up getting turned on to Joseph Newman, and I read it. I spent the 50 books and read his book, and he made some very simple points that were just incredible. They were just like getting hit upside the head with a frying pan. These very simple observations about magnetics. And that was the crack in the wall. That's when I stepped through the mirror and I never looked back. And so from that moment on, since 1988, we've been building theory. Then we built technology to prove the theory, thousands of hours of lab work. We had the theory, but what it took a while was we didn't have the electronic transistors and switching devices we really needed to commercialize it. And those came along in the mid-90s. And once we got our hands on high-quality switching transistors, what they call MOSFETs and IGBTs, and then neodymium magnets, there was no stopping us. So we modeled and built all the pieces, and we came up with the electronic switching circuitry to do it, which was the real challenge, because controlling a magnetic flux is a very powerful thing, and we call it the beast, and it's very hard to tame the beast. So a couple of thousand dead transistors later, we perfected the switching technology to make it possible and control the electromagnets. From there, and then we had already come up with configurations where we could, what we call force without induction. So we were able to move our armature around without creating any counter-motive drag or force. That's the whole big deal with Lenz, what's called Lenz's law, is that Mother Nature in magnetics, Mother Nature anytime you induce a field in a electric body, a coil, or a piece of metal, Mother Nature turns around and creates exactly the opposite direction of current flow, which creates a magnetic field that opposes you. And then you have to expend all this extra mechanical energy to overcome this drag force. Well, we eliminated the drag force aspect of it, which means we pay a very, very small electrical price to make a lot of horsepower. And so we built our first prototype. We proved it worked. And we thought naively, we went out to the world thinking the world was going to love us and accept us for all this new invention. And we proceeded to instantly get beat with clubs. And
talk to us about that in detail, if you would, for a minute, Paul.
Well, you go out to investor groups, and of course they have to do their due diligence, and they instantly run off to the academics and universities. They say, "What do you think about this?" And then they think you're defying the laws of physics, which we're not. And generally, you just have to. And the academic community would run scared to death. We'd tell our investors and people were trying to get interest in that we were crackpots, and then they'd gang up and the war was on. They very rarely ever won the argument, but under no circumstances would they ever say that what we were doing was correct or true, even if they believed it, just because their reputations, their careers, it's dogma and it's the priesthood, and that scientific politics gets in the way of a lot of progress. So we basically had to put our machine on hold, and then we had other technology that is very powerful too that we've been doing, which we call magnetic energy recovery. And we said, okay, well, to make some money and get this company out the ground, we went into developing inverters, green technology, lots of different things to build a company that could support. And we figured we're just going to have to, if we want to build this motor, we're going to have to do it on our own funds. So let's build a company with some of our other technology, and which we've done. And it just took about twice as long as we thought. So the machine, I didn't even fire it up for 7 or 8 years. It sat there, basically covered up. And then all of a sudden this year, things started to break loose. We saw that it was time to reintroduce the motor. We met Richard Surratt, who came and did some documentary work, and some other people started showing some interest. So we went full hog and have totally unveiled the machine to the public through YouTube and the Energy Conference. And we've got an amazingly positive response. I'm astounded and very happy about it. So we're back to what we originally started with, and this is the game changer. This is the one that repowers civilization and makes all the other stuff we're doing obsolete.
I remember playing with magnets as a kid and thinking to myself, how is this not energy? Because you try and push two positives or two negatives together and they push it away from each other. And then I would have visions of grandeur about how maybe the pyramids were built with sound waves and magnets and stuff like that, just my sci-fi mind. But what you're talking about really makes sense, because that's energy. And you're not doing anything except for putting two pieces of magnet close together, and there's that magnetic field, which is incredible.
Well, exactly. See, here's the deal with permanent. It's all about Newton's third law of equal and opposite reaction. So there's three Newton's law. So the take with science is that magnetism has no energy value. It can only be used as a lever or a way to transform energy. So if you take motors and generators, if it's built with the standard configuration, all motors are a generator, and all generators are a motor. So if I put 1,000 watts electrical in to a motor, I'm only going to get 1,000 watts mechanical out at best case. You can never have more than 100% input. So what we've done is said, well, if we truly have an energy value, we should be able to go in and exploit that energy value and put electrical power in and then have more accountable out, which is exactly what we've done. And how we do that, but Mother Nature has this thing called Lentz reactions, which means it always creates an equal and opposite magnetic force that opposes you at all times. So if I run current into a system and I have create a magnetic field, the second I have induction, that next field turns around and opposes me completely. So I have to, no matter what I do, I have to expend energy to overcome the oppositional force that Mother Nature builds into the system. And that's why scientists say you can never overcome that force, that is Newton's third law of equal and opposite reaction. And they look at it as an axiom, an absolute universality, that it can never be beaten, and that's always the way it works. Well, we turned around and made our machine, which we call force without induction, and said, no, you're wrong. It doesn't apply in this case. So we built a completely different magnetic model that's not subject to Maxwell's laws or Lenz's reactions. And that allowed us to exploit the energy value in magnets. So Mother Nature set it up to where it keeps that energy value in magnetism in check. So basically what we went in is fooled Mother Nature and do what we do. And then all of a sudden, now we have energy. Now suddenly we went into more accountable energy than what we input to the system. And so that totally says that Newton's third law of equal and opposite reaction doesn't always apply to magnetics. It's not universal. Lenz's reactions are quite true. I would never argue with that, how they have them configured, and what's called the Maxwell equations that explain all that. They're perfect, they're beautiful, but we don't do it that way. So we went in and said, if you build a machine this way and you take those Lenz reactions out of it, suddenly we can exploit magnets as an energy source, and that's exactly what we do.
And when you said you could get a lot of horsepower, how much horsepower are you producing with this prototype? And do you have other forms of motors that are producing horsepower as well?
Yeah, well, there's all kinds of other motors out there, but this particular one, right now we're getting about 3/4 of a horsepower out of it. And we purposely built resistive limitation in it because we didn't have magnetic mastery down so much. So we put 1,300 watts in, and it transforms purely to heat. There's no conversion of electricity to mechanical power. So that energy is 100% accounted for with storable usable heat. We put our 1,300 watts into our machine. Boom, we got 1,300 watts. That's 100% accounted for. The mechanical action, the rotation, is strictly created by the magnets. So the magnets are producing all the mechanical energy, and that comes out to almost 500 watts of mechanical energy that we get. And it's a rough and crude prototype. I mean, it's the first one built. It's like the first reciprocating engine. So we have a total accountable energy at all times of 1,777 watts, or 1,500, just call it 1,500 watts, or 1,700 watts, when we only have 1,300 watts of accountable energy at the input. So we always have 1,700 or 1,800 watts of accountable energy. And that, according to science, is absolutely can't be, and it totally proves that magnets have an energy value. And it's a kinetic, gyroscopic motion that can be imparted and exploited, and that we use a particle theory to explain what magnetic lines of flux are, and we just here's the empirical data that says you're wrong. And then the beauty of it is that 1,300 watts we're doing at the input, we purposely built that limitation in. So the next prototype, we've perfected our switching and our electronics to such a level that now we can go down to where we're shooting to make that input more like 400 watts. And the mechanical output, we're doing the work to perfect that to where the mechanical output should be more like 1,500 watts mechanical for 500 watts input. And that leaves you a whole bunch of magnetic mechanical force to run generators with, exploit, and now you have a continuous output that can be self-sustaining and supply all the energy you want, because you've taken magnetic lines of force and converted them to mechanical energy without having to pay an input price to do so. That's where we fool Mother Nature. All within the known laws of physics, absolutely easy to understand once you understand how magnetics work. No esoteric explanations. It just took the technology, the electronics technology, to catch up to make it commercially possible, and that's where we're at. So
if somebody wanted to power their house, then they'd need an entire garage, basically. They'd need a lot of square footage to do something like this, wouldn't they?
Not at all. So the typical house draws 24 kilowatt hours of energy a day over a 24-hour period. That's an average 1 kilowatt hour per hour. And so we're looking at, you know, from all our math and the technology we have, uh, is to where, you know, something like a 4 by 4 by 5 foot tall device that spins 24 hours a day, you know, and that includes batteries and DC output. So you have storage to add, you know, to where you can do peaks and things like that. Uh, you know, to be, you know, in the corner of your garage, in your basement, and it's 24/7 delivering you power, all the power you need. And we just find it is not that big a deal, you know, because like I say, our first prototype worked at least twice as well as we thought it would. And we've got all the data, and it's just a matter of commercializing these things to where every home should have one. So our plan is to, once we hit a kilowatt of electrical output or mechanical output, so we can get a kilowatt of electrical output out of it, you know, which means just tying a regular generator to it. Then the average house is powered, you know, and and from there it's a matter of scaling it up, because we have all the technology we need to mass produce this, build them, and you know, and that's been the problem with so many other inventors. They didn't have a lot of it. They didn't have the electrical skills to do the engineering that we've done. But they build some pretty amazing devices, like Joseph Newman's. He builds some stuff that's amazing. The only problem is he has to haul it around on the back of a semi truck, you know. So
Right. It's
not
impractical.
commercially applicable. Our deal is to get this in the hands of the public, low cost, extremely competitive, turns you completely energy independent, small ones to big ones. You've got an electric car that you plug in, you know, that charges all night. Your house is fully powered. And we have to, at this time in civilization, we have to completely decentralize power. It's just absolutely mandatory that we do that. Because if we don't, you know, I don't like, you know, the statistics are that if the grid goes down for a year, that 90% of Americans will have starved to death before that year is up. And I don't like it when a bunch of mean old men that I don't really trust have their finger on the switch and can turn the grid off anytime, or some crazy dictator, or not to mention the coal and the fossil fuels and the nuclear energy that's polluting the planet. We have solutions right now. I'm not the only guy with them. I'm just the one closest to making it commercial. And if we don't do it, you know, I don't see a lot of future, you know, because the grid is going to go down, the solar flare is going to come. And number one is, to me, one of the first things we have to do is completely disassemble the nuclear power industry.
You were reading my mind. Thank you so much for saying that. Literally reading my mind.
And this is a solution. Decentralizing the grid, energy independence, local independence, not to mention when you have dirt cheap, abundant electricity, then there's indoor agriculture, there's aquaponics, there's just incredible ways. It's all about energy. It's the next leap in energy. Every leap in civilization is a leap in energy from the caveman on. You know, everybody, human being, since the beginning of time, his life rotates around energy. And so it's like I try to tell people, it's like I have this thing I ask people, I says, what's the most important thing in your life besides air? And you hear, oh, money and my kids, or, you know, this or that. And I says, no, the most important thing in your life besides air is electricity. Because without it, overnight you're a caveman and you're chasing bunnies with rocks for a living. And, you know, electricity brings you your water, it takes your sewage away, it pumps your gas, your car doesn't work without electricity. I mean, absolutely everything is bound to electricity. And that's why you need to be independent. We've got to totally go to clean energy. I mean, and magnets. I mean, there's so much energy in the magnets. They never wear out. They never stop producing gyroscopic particles. The theory is that it's a 100% efficient nuclear decay process. So it's tied to Einstein's E is equal to mc squared. So the mass of a magnet can keep making magnetism. It takes generations before you can detect any depletion of mass. And since it's 100% efficient, there's no There's no polluting, there's no plutonium or uranium or any of that technology. I mean, a nuclear fission is 1% efficient, and then the other 99% kills you. So it is the solution, and we start small, and from small to big scale, but mostly it's giving people power everywhere and anywhere in their local level, in their local community. And there's no we'd like to raise an army of entrepreneurs and give them the ability to go out and just take down the big trees, man, because the big powers to be, the big utilities, they're just day is done. It has to be done, and only us are going to be able to make it happen. So let's get to it, is my opinion.
And once this gets to a commercial level, then you're going to have other corporations, businesses, scientists, entrepreneurs, etc., that are going to want to make it faster, make it more efficient, make it smaller, more affordable, etc. So this, if you could if you could have a modular system of energy like you're referring to without having to go to the ends of the abyss to get it, it's incredible. And I'm thinking of the possibilities with something like that. I mean, and then if there was a solar flare, or also the nuclear facilities that are out there, if you couldn't decommission them right away, or if something did happen, you could use those as a backup plan to at least keep energy into those fuel rods to hope, to have a way to convert that energy to keep them cool, because that's key. If they're not going to stay cold at a certain temperature, well, that's when they start going boom, and then you have nuclear isotopes floating around for millions of years, etc.
Exactly.
So this is cool.
We just have to. There's huge amounts of money to be made taking the nuclear industry apart. I mean, economic boom like you wouldn't believe. A classic example of what abundant energy does is people. I know a lot of people don't like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but if you live here in the Northwest where all these dams were built, it's just an incredible thing that happened. So against all the power, the power companies and the big energy concerns, they fought him tooth and nail to build the Bonneville power projects, the Grand Coulee dams and all that. Well, he built them anyway. And suddenly there was this abundance of water, land, and incredibly cheap power. And instead of letting the power barons dole out the power, he created a co-op system where he gave all that power to the people for dirt cheap and said, okay, go build an economy with it. And so it drove the biggest middle class boom. I mean, what happened here in the Northwest was incredible. The economic growth and the aluminum industry, agriculture, on and on, all based on that abundant hydroelectric power that was going for less than a penny a kilowatt. And farmers and everybody from small businessmen to farmers to huge corporations took that energy, and the economic growth that it developed paid the government back thousands of times over in revenues and tax base. And it was just this huge thing, and it raised the standards of living. I tell you, my people were dirt poor and barefoot. And once those dams happened, and we can do exactly the same thing, abundant, cheap energy with no ecological ramifications that will drive economic growth and prosperity like it's never been seen before.
Now that you have a prototype set up, how long would it take for somebody to build something like this if they had the know-how and a couple of extra sets of hands?
Well, 4 of us built it in 18 months, and building it was one thing, making it work was another. But there's lots of different ways to go about the same thing that are simpler. It's like Peter Linderman and John Bedini they've got some very sophisticated versions of their schoolgirl model. And you can start to study this and research and study the magnetic theory and everything, and actually get devices that work, right? You can buy one of their sophisticated machines for about $3,000 and assemble it right in your living room right now. So we're not the only guys doing this, and there's just tremendous things, and that's one of my things, is trying to get the public to make a small club in your neighborhood, do it in your garage, but there's things you can start right now. I mean, it's an amazing thing that's happening, and somehow here in the Northwest, there's just been suddenly all the top inventors in the world in this are all suddenly live within 20 or 30 miles of each other. So there's been a tremendous amount of collaboration. I mean, just an amazing, and it's really just advanced things at a logarithmic rate that I hadn't expected, because we've all we call it groundhog mode, where you stay in your hole and keep your head down, and do your work in secret. Well, that's changed a lot. And the collaboration that's going on is amazing. Just an amazing advances in technology. And that's why at the energy conferences we're demonstrating things that are just undeniable. I mean, and people who know what they're doing and know how to measure power and know how to present the science, and it's just been a sea change here over the last few years.
Not only that, but there's also with the printers that are out there, the 3D printers are
Oh
pretty
yeah.
cool, and different techs. And let's hope that things continue to prosper because, really in all reality, there's going to have to be, even though these guys out there that are the oil barons and have so much money in these fuels that are literally pulled out of the earth, they've got to realize that if they keep doing it, it's going to be like Lorax with Dr. Seuss. They're going to run out of material, and maybe not in their lifetime, but there's got to be a little bit of heart left in some of those guys to where they care about their future generations. I certainly hope so, because I remember when I went out to... Have you ever been to Wink, Texas, by any chance?
No, I'm not sure I've been there, but I've been all over the Texas oil patch, I can tell you that.
Oh, man, I went out to Wink, Texas about, I don't know, several months ago to see that giant sinkhole that was going to overtake the town. And it was a long way away from the town. I shouldn't say a long way, but it was several miles outside of the township, essentially. Yet it stunk so bad that you've got to have some, a pretty good stomach to overcome that. And I was okay out there, but I can certainly imagine people that wouldn't be used to it, you'd be getting sick immediately. Headaches, stomach aches. I mean, it was literally borderline toxic out there, giant swaths of area. And you look at all the fracking and that's going on here, even in the U.S., it's got to stop eventually because it's taken over too much.
It's just insanity, and we all love our cars and we all love our, we can't,
Absolutely.
The fossil fuel industry we just need to logically phase it out, and the deal is vested interest has always been vested interest. It's been that way since the beginning of time. And, I know who they are and what they're about. It's just that aspect of human nature. And people have let themselves be fooled that they're all powerful and we're not. Well, I got news for them. The public's got way more power than those guys. And I don't care what Fortune 1000 company you have out there, what politician, what government, concerted collective effort by us. And we don't even have to be an organization, just voting with our dollars and voting with our, we can bring any corporation to its knees in 2 weeks. And I tell people that and they think I'm nuts. I says, no, we are human beings, are reality generators. And if we put our minds to it and, and don't indulge in feelings of helplessness, victimhood, and fear, all the things that they seem to, beat us with, there's no stopping us. It's just a matter of realizing it's there and being fearless about pursuing it. It's that simple. And I'm telling you, you take a couple of million people who start picking on one of these Fortune 500 companies, they'll fold in 2 weeks. Same with politicians, same with it. We are in charge. We have the power. We have incredible amounts of wealth. It's just that we just don't get it all focused in one direction, and that's all it takes.
Well, certainly our energy source goes above and beyond this physical plane. And even if you look at Kirlian photography, you can see energy that our eyes aren't picking up with the 0.01% electromagnetic light spectrum that it sees. So there's a lot out there. And we'll stick with the nuts and bolts and such because I don't want to give any woo-woo in this presentation because I do feel that this is so important. And even though a lot of that stuff isn't woo-woo, to some they think that it is. But anyway, so
I'm just saying
Go ahead.
And it doesn't even take the woo-woo stuff. It just says, hey, I'm going to, I believe this, I want it. So you take a little bit of daily action every day and you just leave the corporations are, they're just, and all the vested interests, it's like their day's done. It's inevitable. So it's just a matter of, just taking some daily action to bring it into your life,
Let's go think about that for a minute. If you consider what it was like back in the 80s with, you've got the VHS, you've got CDs, etc. And then now it's all digital, basically, or 99% of it's digital. You can still buy a CD, but if you go to Best Buy, there's just a couple of aisles out there compared to what it used to be. And the music videos and the way that things change, it's like if you're a giant conglomerate, you can either go with it and you can follow the new trends and profit off of that, or you can be like the dinosaurs that weighed 50 tons or however big some of them were, and they're not here anymore because they, for whatever reasons, they weren't able to evolve the way that they needed to. So we're in a time now, it literally is a renaissance of sorts, and hopefully...
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and also, I've seen some pretty cool tech of these motors that actually run on air in India. This was all the way back in like 2003 I saw these things, but they never really took off either. So I think the most important thing now Paul, since this tech's getting out there, is we got to find those marketers. As bad as this sounds, because marketing could be a double-edged sword.
I love the marketing guys. That's what that makes the world go round. And entrepreneurs, right? I want to give this technology to entrepreneurs who can go out there, install it, sell it, run with it, lead, don't take any no's from politicians, anybody who commercial code or whatever. Just do it, and don't ask for permission, and don't beg for forgiveness either. Just do it. It's like, and I mean, one guy can be beat on and brought to a halt, but 40,000 of them out there across America telling their neighbors and their friends and marketing this stuff, it's unstoppable.
What kind of price point do you want to get this at, realistically? Because if somebody's going to use this for their house to power all their appliances and electrical needs, what would something like that be worth?
Well, look what people pay for solar panels, If you want to power your house up to where you can get off the grid 24/7 and actually have enough power, to survive through the winter and whatnot, you've got a $50,000 or $75,000 investment in a system like that. I'd like to come in at about half that. You got to love Americans here, because the revolution is on against the utility companies now. The solar industry, it really brings warmth to my heart, because I've been involved with that for so many years. The utility companies, I have to deal with those guys on a regular basis too. And they thought it was just going to die because solar price would never be able to compete with their cheap coal. Well, they didn't expect the Chinese to crash solar panel prices. And then the other thing they miscalculated is they underestimated how determined Americans are to quit feeding the utility industry and become independent. And I know so many people that have gone independent, even though they could get by cheaper paying the utility company, they want their independence, and they don't want to be on, under control by utility companies who can turn their power on or off or raise the rates or do whatever they want, and they've got to pay. So the American that independent spirit it's happening all over the United States, and the solar industry is booming, and now you're seeing utilities in total panic, just like what they did in Arizona. This will be the same way. I want to be able to at least come in under the cost of a solar panel system. So, a good price point we'd like to shoot for. I mean, whether we get there or not, I'm pretty sure we can, is, about, 25 or 30 grand, and you're set for life, And
that's giving you a kilowatt of power an hour?
24 kilowatt hours a day.
Okay. So essentially for a family of four, that should be fine. And I guess one way for these businesses, utility companies, to stay in business is they could buy mass amounts from you, and then they could take that energy for people that don't have 25 grand to drop or 35 grand to drop. I mean, so many people, even though they're working their butts off and have good jobs, I know a lot of people out there that are making decent money and they're not spending exuberantly, but because of just bills and issues, they're going literally paycheck to paycheck with utilities and everything else. So maybe you could offer that, or they could offer it. You could. But what if they came to you, Paul? I guess I'm gonna play the devil for a minute here. I come to you with an opportunity. I'll give you $1 billion. All you got to do is give us a patent on this or something like that, and then nobody else will have access to it but them, and they can do whatever they want with it then.
Well, we're pretty adamant about not going that right. So many people build companies praying that the big company will come buy them, and then they're off to the Caribbean with pocketfuls of money. Our attitude is, nah, we didn't, we're kind of like the Blues Brothers. We're on a mission from God, so.
Hello. I love that movie.
And that's our attitude. So it started that way, and it's going to end that way. So, and so our investors, we've got about 100 investors. They're all pretty enlightened people, and they took the risk on us because of the dream. They share the dream with us, and at the same time, we've created a lot of valuable industrial technology that's not controversial. And so we got a wide portfolio of technology to take to the world. And trust me, we haven't got any warm receptions from big corporations who are already in there. And people don't realize that there's really no such thing as a free enterprise system in America. It's all controlled, and it's all crony. And when you're trying to muscle your way into the food chain, it's not an easy task, because no matter how good your technology is, they don't want you around, because corporations dole out technology after they've milked all the money out of the old technology, and they just dole it out to you piece by piece. And they shouldn't have that ability to thwart the free enterprise system. If it's truly a free enterprise system, well, let the better mousetrap win. get vested interest out of it. And
That'll be a great day when that happens.
yeah, well, and that's where people have to make that happen, you know. And so many people have been brainwashed that you know, they're all high and almighty and the providers of all things good. Well, I take issue with that. So, and it's, you know, I don't hate them. They're right now, they're kind of a necessary evil. I don't waste my time on, you know, that kind of emotion. My deal is let's just move forward and make it happen. We have the solutions. You know, what are we waiting on? You know, and I'm not going to them to get the funding or the financing or their support. My support I want from guys just like you know, the common folks, the people who make everything and pay for everything should have the final say.
Absolutely. And are you going to be able to get something like this, do you think, into, let's say somebody wanted one for a generator, essentially, like they enjoyed camping, they wanted to go out to the beach, and they wanted to have something to plug in their laptop, and, you know, maybe their cooler, their ice cooler or something like that. Is there a possibility that you could get this thing small enough and efficient enough that somebody could go pick one up at Sears or, you know, Target or something like that?
Oh yeah, it's just like I tell the people, it's just a matter of material science and engineering. You know, that's what's made what we can do possible. Is because, you know, people don't realize my heroes are those, you know, those guys with no face that are buried down in the basement of some giant corporation creating all these beautiful transistors and all this great technology I have to use. And those guys don't get a lick of credit. Nobody knows about them, but they're my personal heroes because they provided me the technological tools I need to make this possible, you know? And
I like your style. Seriously, that's well said.
Oh, thank you. It's just, you know, there's a lot of people out there doing wonderful things, and they do it for a short paycheck and no thank you, you know. So they made it possible for me to do this, and so now I'm taking it to the next level. And, you know, and there's business people out there. There's people at, you know, small semiconductor companies and magnet companies and all this great stuff. And I know so many good companies that got out of business because they just can't get their way in the marketplace because of the rigged system. They can't go compete on a fair level. And I just want to bring all these small companies that make all this stuff together and get them to working together and, you know, drive the cost of production down and get the engineers that, you know, and it's energy is money. And that's what people don't get. The more energy we put out there, the cheaper. You just watch how the economy booms. I mean, there's just prosperity is not that hard to figure out. Low cost energy and low cost materials. It's classic Adam Smith. People put their mind in their hands to materials and energy, and then they make magic happen. And so when the energy is doled out and the resources are kept out of our hands, well, you know, then we can't drive that economic prosperity, and that's easy to fix. We live in a world of total abundance, and anybody that tells you that there's a all shortages are artificial creations.
They're senses of illusion, absolutely, and let's hope it stays that way. I certainly don't want to see it get to that point to where Mother Nature can't reproduce anymore because it gets killed from all the just destruction that's going on. Like, you know, you talked about the nuclear reactors, we talked about the fracking, and some people say that, oh, that's not enough to cause substantial damage, etc., and Mother Nature can always overcome that. And I certainly hope they're right, but I don't agree. I think that there's got to be a point.
Absolutely. A classic example of that is we had one of the most beautiful springs here in Spokane, and just 10 billions of flowers all summer long, just yards full of them and everywhere, and yet I've yet to see a honeybee all summer long.
Well, that's spooky.
Isn't it, though? And I'm a big fan of honeybees. They're my buddies since I was a kid. And
can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Did you hear about that? They tried to keep it hidden, but I actually reported on this. There was a pretty big leak out there northwest, southeast of Mount Rainier, kind of in between the outskirts of Mount Rainier and where you're at. But I'm wondering if there could be some damage. I mean, there's something that you guys aren't seeing from the radiation leaks out there.
Well, that's possible. See, you know, not only is Washington State downwind from Fukushima, but if you live here in Spokane, you're downwind from Hanford. And, you know, one day the gang and I were in a restaurant, and we were in the Tri-Cities near Hanford, and we were just happened to be sitting next to some engineers, you know, and they said, whoa, you're living in Spokane. I wouldn't live there. You're downwind of this place, and this place is going to go someday, man. You don't want to be downwind of this when it happens. So, I mean, Hanford is just an absolute nuclear nightmare.
They said that to you, like just, oh hey, by the way, you like your coffee? You're gonna die maybe.
Yeah, don't
So
be living
bad.
downwind from Hanford, because this place is going to go up someday, and you don't want to be downwind when it does. It's like, never seen these guys in their life, and we're like, oh yeah, thanks for the advice.
Thanks for the warning. At least they warned you. You got to give them credit for
Yeah,
that.
and I know lots of people who've worked there over the years, and it's just incredible. I mean, it's leaking into the Columbia River aquifer. It's piles of old plutonium and uranium and everything. It's just a freaking disaster. And and how the Superfund system works, that's just a jobs program, basically to get government money piled into these communities. And I know this from personal experience, knowing there's people who work in the Superfund sites from Montana to all over. Don't show up. So once the Superfund site starts, the local politician looks at it as job programs for the next 40 years. And the government just keeps pouring money in and money in and money in, and they keep putzing along as slow as they can and making as little progress using old technologies, because they want the money forever and ever. They don't really care about the cleanup, which is another totally it's just anathema, and it's all about, milking the money and for as little progress as they can make. And that's Hanford right now. That's what's going on. That's what's going on in Butte, Montana, in the copper mine. And, so you pay a whole lot for just a little bit of progress, and it's just all on the taxpayer's back, and it just drives me crazy to watch it.
And think, you could use these for cell phones. You wouldn't have to recharge your phone. You could use it for just about any appliance you could think of. You could use it for electronics, and the sky's the limit. I really like that, because even with war applications, now let's look at this from a military standpoint. As dark as this sounds, the military could use this tech and really just be so far above and beyond another fighting faction, because not only do they have unlimited energy, they can go wherever they want. They don't have to refuel. They don't have to have this endless supply, this supply chain that goes on for X amount of miles with all these ships and tankers and supply force and personnel. So you get this into the right military with the right, mindset. And man, that would be, you could keep the peace essentially if this gets into the right hands and is mastered and really taken to the next level, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and look, and everywhere and anywhere, look at shipping, right? One of the biggest polluters on the planet is the shipping industry.
I read an article the other day. There's 12 of them that give out half of the pollution, and as far as the carbon monoxide, half of the carbon monoxide that's going out there from pollution is from 12 tankers.
Yeah, there you go. And that comes from, running number 4 and number 6 bunker fuel by the thousands of gallons a minute to keep those big ships going. Well, gee, if you had magnetic energy motors like we've got, then you never have to put, you build them on a massive scale, you exploit that shaft horsepower, and now you've got ships that, if they're not totally magnetic powered, at least they're partially magnetic powered. And guess what? You're not dumping all that bunker fuel into them, and that industry, now you have clean shipping, all that pollution is gone.
If you could get one of these motors to produce 200 horsepower, about the size of a typical engine, that would be, in my opinion, the pivotal point to get everybody to want one. I wonder if you could use a rotary type combination of such.
Yeah, and see, it's just like, we said, this is the beginning, right? There's literally 100 ways to go about creating these devices. It's all about your ingenuity and, bigger, better, faster. Let's look at where we've come with reciprocating engines. From the first one that was ever built to now, it's the same thing. This is the first one's ever built. It's a little clunky and a little big and needs a lot of perfection. But the fact is it's there, and that's just a matter of putting the mind and will to it to create, let's look at what the computer age has done in the last 50 years. It's the same thing. If it's an industry that pays itself and makes profits along the way, the innovators get right to it and make it bigger, better, cheaper, faster, and it's a natural progression that can't be stopped.
Yeah, this is great. And are there any questions before we close out tonight that I should have asked but didn't, or are there some gems you want to leave us with?
No, I think you've done great, and it's about bringing the public awareness that this stuff is real. It's based in total science that we understand. All the materials are here, and my deal is to bring the public awareness up and hey, join us, man. We're on a mission here, and you need it, your kids need it, and and touching on the future is what I've really been trying to tell people, and everybody has to participate, and it'll happen. A bunch of little inventors, if they don't get out in the world and let the world know, it's just gonna, it's our deal is to not let it die with us.
Absolutely. This should continue, and I really appreciate you coming on here with this leak project. I would strongly recommend our listeners go to paulmariobabcock.com. Also check out the magneticenergysecrets.com. And if you go to leakproject.com, folks, you'll have access to exclusive content. Subscribe, become a member at Leak Project. Also, we have 2 YouTube channels, youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord and William Wallace. Appreciate everybody that's been a part of this. I hope you have a fantastic day wherever you are, and be the change you want to see. This is Rex Bear. Talk to you soon. 3. Energy device, magnetic motor, billboard today, Paul Babcock, latest leak project, September 2016. All right, folks, we have a real treat for you today here at the Leak Project. We have Paul Babcock with us. Now, he's got some great websites that I would definitely recommend checking out. The first one is magneticenergysecrets.com, and he's also got a personal website that's available at paulmariobabcock.com. And it's just an honor to speak with you. We had a chance to speak a little bit before the show. How the heck are you?
Oh, thanks. I'm doing great, and thanks for all the interest. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you too. And if you would please, for our audience, give them a brief background about yourself, and then let's get into your work and what you specialize in.
Well, I'm born a geek, die a geek kind of guy. Grew up on a little reservation town here in eastern Washington, and just had a fascination with magnets, electronics, all things psychic, and all esoteric interests from a young age. And my hobby turned into a career, and of course I've been a Nikola Tesla fan since I was a kid, and just started on a life mission early in age to figure this stuff out, what they were really talking about. Was it real? How did it relate to the laws of physics? And that's been intertwined with my working career as an industrial dog out there in avionics and radio communications, and traveled to have Pro Bull traveled has been my career. So I've been all over the world doing electronics for at least 35 years now. So, and we started Flyback Energy, our company, as a platform to take all this technology my 2 partners and I have developed over the last 20 years to the marketplace, and that's where we are now.
Well, that's fantastic, and I'd certainly like to get into your work and your technologies that you've helped put together. What exactly is, if somebody was to pick up one of your books, such as the one I'm looking, or even a DVD, I'm looking at one you have right now, Babcock DC Motor Exclusive Full Disclosure. Are you putting together basically energy machines with magnets?
Correct. Being a big fan of the laws of physics, and my research into all this, trying to understand Tesla, 0 point, all of it, I really came to the conclusion through just hardcore empirical observation with magnets that magnets have an exploitable energy value. That science will tell you that magnetism is action at a distance, that you can use them as levers and you can use them to transform energy, but they have no energy value unto themselves. So I take issue with that because the empirical evidence says that's totally incorrect. So there's been lots of people before me who have done all kinds of different research and machines and have confirmed it and verified it. And so I'm not the first guy to say it, and I won't be the last. I just spent my time defining it mathematically, how it related to the laws of physics, and how to exploit it and make it exploitable so it can actually be used in power society. If you don't have something that can't be commercialized, it doesn't really serve any purposes. And that was the big problem, is so many people created prototypes and stuff, but they'd run about 15 minutes before they blew up, or they were, the size of a pickup truck, and, hugely expensive and a lot of work and mass for not much horsepower out. Although it proved the principles that magnetism has an energy value, I was the guy that was determined to turn it into something that could be commercialized for everybody.
Have you actually made something then that creates energy with magnets good enough to commercialize?
Absolutely. That's what that motor disclosure is about. That's our first prototype. And I'm not the only guy doing this stuff. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But I think our approach is probably the best. It took a while. We had the theory pretty well perfected back in the early 90s. My two partners and I mean, we've seen electrical phenomena and all kinds of mysterious stuff. We're all power engineers, things that you just can't explain with standard physics. And then it seemed all mysterious at the time, but we figured it out, and we figured out that it's this energy value that's within magnetics that shows itself occasionally. Mother Nature has it governed, and that's what Lenz's law and resistance is about. So we figured out how to trick Mother Nature's governor, and everything we do is within the known laws of physics. There's no esoteric anything, and it's very hard to prove us wrong. That's why we have been able to get where we've gotten. And our first prototype, that motor, it shows the over unity effect. I'm not a real fan of that term. We define it as mathematical inequality, where we've learned our way around the Maxwell, which we call we call it force without induction, or the elimination of Lentz reactions. And so once we were able to do that, and the other half is we're able to create very powerful magnetic fields for very little, electromagnetic fields for very little energy. So between the electromagnetic fields that we create for practically no cost and the permanent magnet, and the permanent magnets that we drive with that don't induce any Lentz reactions, we completely altered the physics. We took Maxwell right out of it, and now we have beat Mother Nature's governor, and now we can produce motors that literally we're turning the magnetic kinetic force within magnetic flux out of permanent magnets into mechanical action, and it has no relationship to the input energy. So we're able to show that no matter what we do with our machine right now, we have 1,300 watts of electrical input that transforms to 1,300 watts of pure heat that's accountable. The mechanical action comes strictly from the magnets. It has nothing to do with the input. It's catalyzed by electricity, but not a product of the electricity. So in our machine, even though we have 1,300 watts in, we have an accountable 1,777 watts of energy. So, and that's the inequality. And once you understand how to do this, you always have more accountable energy than your input energy.
That's awesome.
And it's, I used to get beat to death by physicists, it was always combat, and now it's not so much. It's changed a lot. I mean, the public awareness and perception of what's possible has really transformed in the last 10 years.
I got to say, too, because I've never been really good with spending a lot of time in putting something together. Like, for example, I talked to somebody yesterday that actually has patents on third-gen night vision. I kind of call him Uncle Eddie because he's not really my uncle, but with the way that we met, it's kind of like I feel like I've known him forever. He's about 90 years young now. And make a long story short, he put together these tubes that would take an entire day to put together one of them, and it was basically every element in the chart, and I couldn't do that. I would run out of steam, essentially. I'd have to do 30 different things in that amount of time just because I have an attention span of a goldfish. So the fact that you can do something like this, I find quite incredible. And how much does something like this does it cost to put this together, what you're referring to?